Stacy, good morning, Bill. How are you?
Good, Nick. How's it going?
Good. Just wanted to ask you about these second days of these joint practices. Have you seen in the past, maybe improvement from guys from that first day to that second day? And, how much is the importance for you there in terms of evaluating, their improvement from day one to day two, joint practices?
Yeah, well, I hope so. But we'll see. Look, I hope we all improve. So that's why we're doing it, is to get better every single day. But I'd say the big thing for today is what we're doing is a lot different than what we did yesterday. So really all our work today is going to be in the red area. Of course, some of the fundamentals are the same, but there are a lot of things that are different down there, and it all happens in a much more condensed space. Whichever side of the ball you're on, it doesn't matter, offense or defense. Again, basic fundamental techniques, a lot of those are the same, but they do change just because of the nature of the plays, the nature of the space that you're working in, and how to gain leverage, how to maintain it, how to defeat it, and so forth. And so it's really a little bit of a different game in that area of the field. We're going to work down there pretty much exclusively today. So, it's not like, well, we ran this play yesterday and we're going to run all these same plays today. That's not really what's going to happen today. There'll be a few repeats, but again, the game's it's just a lot different down there. So, but it's a great opportunity for us to work on that. We'll get a lot of snaps in the red area, probably as many as we would in, a couple normal weeks of practice against, again, a different team with different players and a different scheme. So, this will be a really valuable learning day, like yesterday was for us as well. So that's what we're doing today.
Thanks, Bill.
Next question, Phil Perry, followed by Mike Giardi.
Hey, Bill, I have a question about how you decide to work on what you do work on in practice. For instance, yesterday, for us getting to watch that hurry up period at the end of practice, that's a drive that obviously you could be doing something like that at the end of a half. But if you have to win a game, that probably only happens once a game. It's one of many drives in a game. How do you determine how much time you should be spending on that? Because it's obviously an important drive, but you might only get 17 of them during the regular season at the most. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, yeah, it makes sense. Sure. That's the way it is with everything. Plays that are critical game winning or changing plays. I mean, you want to make sure that you're good on those. If it's a hands team recovery, if you recover the ball, you win the game. I don't know how many times it's going to come up during the year, but if you recover the ball, you're probably going to win the game. If you don't, then, you're going to have to deal with some other stuff, probably lose or have a good chance to lose. So, you can't spend a whole practice working on onside kicks, but when it comes up, you got to be able to execute it. So whether it's a 2-minute drive, an onside kick, last punt of the game, whatever it happens to be, those critical plays, you want to make sure that you can execute them and as well as possible. So how much practice time does that take? More than what's really the right amount, but because it's such a critical play, you put a little more into it. So the better you do it and the more efficient you are doing it and more confident that you are in your team being able to do whatever those situations and whether those individual plays are, then probably the less time you need to work on it once you've shown that you can do it well, and then you move on to something else.
And in those potential sort of game-winning drives, I guess, Bill, or those attempted game-winning drives, do you have to, as players, do the players have to get more comfortable with taking risks that they wouldn't otherwise take? And is that a hard thing to get down, especially at the quarterback position? Obviously, they're the guys that are making a lot of the decisions back there.
All right. Well, every situation is different. There's no two that are the same. They're always you can generalize them and put them into certain categories, but ultimately each one is a little bit different. And certainly they're different because of the team you're playing against and what that team does. So whatever offensive plays they run and whoever their go-to players are and whatever defense that team runs and whatever type of defensive coverages and blitzes and pass rushes they use and so forth, like that all changes. So every one of them is different. Even if you have the exact same situation in terms of time and score and all that, it's still different when you put a different defense up there. So Again, you try to, cover general things, and then you try to cover some of the finer points that might only come up, on a very random or infrequent basis. But if you're able to take advantage of it, it can make the difference for you. So a lot of that's mental, a lot of that's watching those situations and talking about them and understand what to do and anticipate there. You only have so many 2-minute drives and practice. It's not like, they can do 7 or 8 of them in a single practice, so you get what you can out of them. But then there's also, like I said, a mental side to that as well, of watching those sequences or putting yourself through the mental exercise of those sequences, and then what to do and what the call would be and what to think about and all that. And, ultimately you want everybody to be on the same page there. And so you don't have time to tell everybody what to do. Everybody needs to know what to do based on the situation, the time. And then, as you said, the quarterback has a lot of important decisions to make, but so is the defensive signal caller, and so are the guys that end up handling the ball. Whoever the quarterback gives the ball to, most of the time it comes out of his hands. So somebody else gets it, then they have to make decisions with it. So yeah, but they're all different. They're not the same. There's some general categories, but they're all different.
Thanks, Bill.
Hey, you're welcome, Phil.
Next question, Mike Giardi. I'd ask anyone else to raise your hand if you have a question for Coach Belichick.
Bill, when you're evaluating Cam, obviously one of his one of the biggest tools in his toolbox is his ability to run the football and be mobile, and he's such a big guy, obviously, to lower the shoulder if he has to. How do you then evaluate him over the course of this summer, knowing that really doesn't come up very often? That's obviously not something you want him to do in practice or even in joint practices.
Yeah, well, it's really true of every player, Mike. So it's really the same. We're not tackling guys, but there's nothing more important on defense than tackling. The running backs and the receivers aren't getting tackled, and what their ability to do to handle the ball and make yards after the catch or with the ball in their hands is critical to their position. So, there are a lot of things like that you can't evaluate. But it is what it is. So we do what we can do, and then that's what we have preseason games for, and live practices for. But those are limited opportunities, but they're important ones.
And if I can follow up, I get asked this question a lot, and I think we sort of make the notation when we're up in the stand watching Cam working with the ones offensive line basically extensively, and Mac will get a series here or there with them. In your vast history, how difficult is it for someone like Mac to then come in with the one offensive line and make that quick transition, or is that just much more simpler than we make it out to be?
Well, look, we've told all the players from back in May when we started, which is the absolute truth, is not to spend a lot of time worrying about who else is out there with you. Worry about what you're doing and try to get it right. And I think that's the most important thing for each and every one of us, is if we would focus on what our job is, how to do it well, how to do it better, how to improve on it. Again, that's all of us, coaches, players, everybody. Like, that's really what we're trying to do. And, spend a lot of time worrying about who else is doing something else and who else is out there or not out there or whatever is honestly a total waste of time and energy. And it's not productive. So we don't really worry about it. I think it's a lot more important for the offensive lineman to play with the offensive lineman than it is for the quarterback to play with the offensive line, and the same thing on defense. It's important for the linebackers to play with the linebackers than it is for the linebackers to play with the secondary, or, whatever. I mean, you can keep going. So the punt team, those guys need to, be ready to work with each other. But at the same time, if somebody else is in there for whatever reason, then again, the most important thing is for them to do their job properly and work with whoever it is next to them. That's something they can't control. So we start worrying about all the things we can't control, I'd say it's going to be a long year.
Thank you for that. Was a clumsy question. Thank you for handling it.
Last question would be Phil Perry.
Bill, I just want to ask you about how you felt about the physicality of yesterday's practice. I'm sure from team to team, I don't know, maybe everybody calls, a non-tackle to the ground practice the same thing, but maybe it feels different team to team. And when you get two teams together, I'm just wondering how you saw it play out yesterday, if you liked the level of physicality between the two teams.
Yeah. Coach Siri and I talked about that before practice, talked about it after practice. I think the working tempo was good. And I think we all got a lot out of the practice. I think they felt like they did. I know we felt like we did. And it was, very similar. Honestly, probably as similar as we could get to the way we would have practiced, without Philadelphia. If we just practice with ourselves. So I think that's, an important part of developing your team is learning how to practice and practicing so that you get better, the guy you're working against gets better, both sides of the ball get better, but at the same time, it's at not a full speed level, but it's at a level where we can work and improve and try to minimize the risk to having a lot of guys on the ground and having piles and, things like that. And so that's how we practice. It's obvious that's how the Eagles practice. And I thought we had a good working practice. And I thought that, Sean and his crew did a good job out there of, identifying infractions and making sure that we understand what is and isn't permissible. And some of them are obvious, but there's obviously a lot of gray out there. But I thought, it's great to have Sean and his crew there, with the holding calls and the defensive pass and offensive pass penalties. And as well as like some fundamental alignments and things like that. But really it's the hand-to-hand, close quarters fighting, whether that's in pass coverage or pass rush, run blocking and so forth, that, I thought those guys did a great job of identifying those plays for us so that we can learn from them and make the proper corrections based on what they saw. So it doesn't matter what we think, it's the way they see it. And that was helpful as well. So, it was good.
Sorry, one final question, Mike Reese.
Thanks, Stacy. Good morning, Bill. I apologize if you were asked this on Chase Winovich just coming back to practice. When Chase is sort of doing what he does best, and what does he bring to the team?
Yeah, well, right now, Chase needs to just, start to get his reps back on the field, and we'll bring him back. He's rehabbed. He's been cleared to practice, so he's off PUP, and let's take it day by day and work depending on what we're doing that day and so forth. Work him into areas that we feel like he's ready for, and obviously he needs to work in every area because he hasn't done much. So let's try to catch him up the best we can. But he'll work hard and he'll do what he can, and we'll just take it day by day.
Thank you, Coach. Thanks, everyone.
All right, great, thanks.